Honorable members, when the business of this House suspended for a luncheon break, the honorable member for Angliston was on the floor. With respect to the issue raised, we are not yet in a position to present the Hansard record. The chair now recognizes the honorable member for Angliston.
Mr. Speaker, I trust that that is done most expeditiously because the member has tarnished my reputation.
Honorable member.
The member has tarnished my reputation.
Honorable member.
Quickly, Mr. Speaker.
I would not want you to revert and to proceed and to discuss that matter until we have the documents that...
Yes, the only thing I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, I hope it is done expeditiously because my reputation is on the record of this Parliament as being tarnished by the member for Carmichael. So all I'm saying
I wouldn't say so
done
yet.
expeditiously.
I think that's a premature...
No, that's my point. That's my point of view.
And the chair's point of view is that that is a premature assessment.
No problem, Mr.
And
Speaker.
we wouldn't want to proceed with that until we are able to verify the facts.
I understand you saying, Mr. Speaker, when the facts come, I'll be very interested with what the chair's position is, Mr. Speaker.
The chair position will be neutral as usual.
Okay, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Speaker. I just said I hope it's done expeditiously. Speaker, the other point is the member for Carmichael made some allusion to me sending him messages. And I want to, there was an innuendo built into that, and I gotta put it on the record. I've communicated with the member on 3 different occasions or different issues. One was the state of roads, the Cordo Avenue Road, asking him to please intervene because it was in horrible condition. And ultimately he did, and I was very appreciative. Cordo, no, I don't even think I said thank you, but he did that. The second issue would have been, I approached him about, I messaged him about sidewalks in Angliston, and he asked me to give him a list of the areas. And the third issue was roadside garages, which I've written to him about one in a particular area of Angliston. And what I did say to him when I saw a case was brought before the Parliament that this was commendable. I don't have any private messages with this member, and the issues that I deal with him are on a level relating to my constituency, and those are the facts, Mr. Speaker. So I don't want the member to give some impression that is not correct, because this is the member who accused the former chairman of BPL of using public funds for makeup, Mr. Speaker. So I don't want him to try that with me in here. Do not try that with me with here. And I wait, Mr. Speaker, for that Hansard, and I trust the member will do the right thing when the time comes. And just for the record, I am referring to a letter, 4th of January 2019, to the minister. In fact, he can go and get the letter, but as he is now drawing it out to get the Hansard, no problem, Speaker. Speaker, when I was speaking earlier, I was saying that it's unfortunate that this administration has sat on these draft bills, which were the product of such excellent work by professionals in his ministry, and has sought to only bring 2 little pieces. I also reiterated that this is what they did on the road traffic bill. They took out 2 little pieces from it and left the comprehensive work. Then the Prime Minister later came, as if it was some new revelation, that we have to change the law, when the member for Bamboo Town is sitting on the very amendments by the very law commission that the Prime Minister spoke to. That was the point I was making, Mr. Speaker. And so, and I also made the point that there was this proximity between the Prime Minister, the report by that entity engaged by the Americans, and also the Prime Minister's comments, which the Prime Minister called coincidental. And I said, you have to be very careful that you do not create a perception that reports emanating from these types of agencies...
Honorable member.
Foreign...
Honorable member.
Yeah?
That is the very issue that we are trying to resolve with a copy of the Hansard. You are going back to it again.
No, Mr. Speaker, we're trying to deal with the issue of the straw market.
You are still regurgitating.
Yes, I'm coming back after a break, Mr. Speaker. I'm rehashing. Is that okay? Is that allowed in the rules, Mr. Speaker? Is it allowed?
Honorable member.
Is it allowed?
I am talking about the specific issue with respect
to
to
straw market. Nothing to do with this.
What the Prime Minister said.
No, that's not what the Hansard is for.
We already dealt with that.
Mr. Speaker, the member for Carmichael is asked for the Hansard to deal with an issue relative to the straw market, not this issue.
Honorable member. This morning, we had a discussion with respect to that issue when it
Yes.
appeared that you were imputing improper motive to the action of the government and the Prime Minister.
And then I read it over to you.
We had that
You
discussion.
accepted it because you saw I was not saying that. I said you have to be careful. You don't give that impression. That's what should I read it again, Mr. Speaker? I didn't think this was the issue. The issue we were dealing with Hansard is to do with the straw market, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, you know, if you would give me some leverage, perhaps you would not...
I'm giving you
No, no,
all
perhaps-
the leverage,
no, no, perhaps
honorable
you would
member.
not misconstrue every step of the way when I contribute, Mr. Speaker. I'm just trying to, I'm only rehashing because I'm coming after a luncheon break. In fact, it's normal and usual in these circumstances. That's all I'm doing, Mr. Speaker.
All I am preventing you from doing is to deal with matters that were already dealt with and the decision was already made.
No decision was made on that, Speaker, because I clarified it for you, and I think you found it non-objectionable. I read it. I said, we have to be careful. Remember, Mr. Speaker? This was not an issue, Mr. Speaker. And my time is, I appreciate if you allow me to continue, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, here we are again, same story, different day. We are forced to question whether this administration is really serious about these matters, which impact the safety and well-being of our population. Speaker, my views are different from the government. I'm not here to massage them, Mr. Speaker. That's not my job. I'm here to speak for the people of Engliston. And I also have an insight on this particular issue that many others do not have. Speaker, this government has been sitting for 2 years on an incredible wealth of work and completed bills. The considerable work was done. They need only to have brought them here. That's all they had to do. The work was done. You just got to physically bring it here, Mr. Speaker. But instead, they have sought to carve out a small segment of that work. And this despite the many recent tragedies highlighting deficiencies in our law and setting the compelling mandate for reform. The compelling mandate is there. And they have not seen it, Mr. Speaker. Listen, the whole world saw you just misrepresent. Mr. Speaker, could you stop my time, please? I'm being disturbed by members. The rules don't allow it. Speaker, the rules do not allow them. I'm calling upon you to assist me.
Honorable member, let's get something straight, please.
So let's get it straight, Mr. Speaker. Let's get it straight.
Have a seat while I'm
Yes,
speaking.
let's get it straight, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, on numerous occasions in the past, I indicated to this parliament I even brought a copy of a booklet to show that you eat what you serve. If you serve something, you should be prepared to eat it. Now, so my position from the chair is, you see you're heckling and speaking to the chair while the chair is speaking, but you don't want anyone to heckle and speak to you while you are speaking. And so all I want to do is put you on notice that while there is privilege in this place, there is no special privilege. So you cannot be seen to be heckling and speaking even when your deputy and your leader is speaking, but when you speak, you want everyone to remain quiet.
Thank you, Speaker. How do you put it, Mr. Speaker? I will eat what has been served up. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the special
Eat
privilege... Mr.
what
Speaker,
you serve.
Oh, it's personal to me now, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, eat what you serve. If you
Thank you,
serve
Speaker.
heckling while other persons are speaking, the chair will permit you to eat heckling while you are speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad this is personal to me.
And
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
that is applicable to all members.
You said to me, Mr. Speaker, you said me, Engliston, Mr. Speaker, and Engliston hears you loud and clear, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Thank you. Loud and the Bahamas hears you, Mr. Speaker, and we thank you. We thank you, Speaker. I'm glad for the personal dishing up to Engliston. Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, the government has been sitting for 2 years, and it's mind-boggling. It's unbelievable, Speaker. It's unthinkable. The amendments debated today were necessitated by the introduction of a craft which fell outside of a definition contained in the Act. Remember, the minister said that it was, in fact, the jet-led product. And we were very challenged by that because it went up in the sky, it came back down, and the rules did not cover it. And that is what led to these amendments, which have finally been brought 2 years later. Our advice at the time, of preparation of this draft bill, was that the current law is deficient in addressing these new innovations in watercraft. And so amendments were drafted in wide terms to potentially capture any new innovations in the future and set a standard norm for safety. It is surprising, with all of the concerns expressed in the advisories that the member spoke about, that even this amendment has sat on this agenda since July of 2018. All of those things. And further, Mr. Speaker, I heard the member, and while this does address the safety issues, the issues in the advisory are very different issues, and I know because I faced them at the time, and we had to do a lot of things. We brought in the Defense Force. We got the police to assist us. We got jet skis for port officers. We engaged the operators and enforcement officers into joint enforcement efforts. And as you see, we have the booths there for the uniforms, IDs. It's a continuing challenge in this particular undertaking. But what I was saying to you is that these provisions do not address those challenges. And they are continuing ongoing challenges, except perhaps the vetting issue, which will be critical to that, Mr. Speaker. So it's not a surprise that we support these amendments, and they're long overdue, Mr. Speaker. But I must emphasize, however, my disappointment that the other important pieces of reform to promote maritime safety have been left behind. Perhaps we require the U.S. government or some other alien force to prompt us to address this issue of the safety and well-being of the Bahamian people and visitors who are at sea. It seems this is how the attention of this government is captured, Mr. Speaker. These important pieces of legislation would introduce provisions, if brought to this House and became law, that would require the attachment of a captain, mate, and engineer. And I was saying privately to the member for Bamboo Town that the water skiing, the water skiing and motorboat control regulations and the amendments that they're doing here relate to pleasure craft. And these are very important pieces of legislation because they have the effect of for the first time, putting in place basic conditions for pleasure craft, like lighting and communications equipment, and the necessity to draw up a travel plan so that you try to minimize this situation of people being lost at sea, no light, no communications, and never found. And so it is putting in place for the first time ever minimum standards for pleasure craft. But what I was saying to the minister, and which has not been brought, and which is critically important, and which does relate to the incident that the member indicated was sub judice, but which is which is germane to the challenges there, were regulations or rules that were developed pursuant to the Boat Registration Act. The Boat Registration Act governs commercial craft, like that in the Exuma situation. And this is the legislation right here. It's called the Boat Registration Small Domestic Commercial Vessels Rules. And it deals with things such as, and I'm going to lay this on the table of the Parliament, it deals with commercial vessels registered in the Bahamas under the Boat Registration Act. It deals with vessels being surveyed, which is one of the issues that rose there, but this even predated the Exuma situation. It anticipated it. It deals with inspections. It deals with repairs, alterations, and modifications. It deals with passenger and seafarer capacity. It deals with the responsibilities of the owner and the master, requirements for obtaining a boatmaster license, having an engineer's license, standards of competence. It deals with working hours, manning and training, and on and on. And Speaker, when I finish, I'd like to lay this on the table of the Parliament because this has not been brought, and this is an absolute response to what we saw happen in recent times in this country, Mr. Speaker. and I'd like to lay some other pieces just to illustrate the gap that has not been met by what we are doing today, while we support it, nevertheless, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the amendments, as I've indicated, would have addressed the issues that emerged according to a BMA report in the Exuma accident, including manpower issued by the introduction of safety inspectors, Speaker. And, the member is reported as saying himself, and, I say this, Mr. Speaker, in all seriousness because these are serious matters. And if you are seriously addressing serious matters, we can know. We can know. And this was, you said, in, the member for Bamboo Town in an interview with Media House, and this is from Eyewitness News. And this would have been, when was this? This is right around the time of the incident in Exuma, and he said we have to tighten up, which is true. And he said that we have a number of persons who have built boats now. So now before those boats are built, we're going to have a naval architect review and have designs to make sure they are safe, etc. But the member anticipated, I think, almost a year ago, whatever, how long it's been since that incident, the necessity of addressing the issues raised by that incident, and still has not brought the appropriate bills which are sitting in his ministry. And I'm urging him to bring them to address these important matters, Mr. Speaker. And there was also a recent Tribune story which spoke about the body of work, and the minister at that time, this would have been done months and months ago, and the minister did not respond or comment. And it spoke about the modernization of the maritime laws so as to create a transformative culture of safety at sea. And
Honorable
but there was
member,
no,
at the Tribune report, could you give the date
the Tribune,
you're adopting?
I'm adopting, yes, Mr. Speaker. I'm adopting it, and it's the Tribune is the June, Tribune report, and I don't see a date on it, it's by reporter Rashad Roll. It's not, October 11th, 2018, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this is what we were engaged with the modernization of road traffic laws, which replaced the 1958 Act. And I remember the ridicule in here during that debate a couple of weeks ago with the amendments to that act. And we did it with the modernization of the road traffic department, particularly with replacing what was then the pervasive manual system with the automation of that department. And I have to say, it looks as if this government is dragging its feet on it. I know last time you said there was a printer or some story or some issue, but I want to encourage you to get them, to put heat under them, Minister, so that they can complete this exercise, because it should have been completed by now. And then we did it with the modernization of aviation technology and legislation. And we had started the automation of the port. That's one of the other things you spoke of in that interview, the fact that you didn't have a comprehensive record of registration, etc. And we had begun a process. I think we had even, a company had been selected for automation. And I don't know what happened with that, but I want to encourage the member to complete the automation process of the port department so that we are able to have an overview, a bird's eye view of what is happening in the industry. And we saw it, we did the same thing in the Met Office. See, I hear them saying 7 years and all that, but you have to appreciate much was achieved, not everything. We left this bill on the agenda a couple months before an election. We didn't get to pass it. So, so much was achieved, though. And they know it. The Speaker, they know it. And Speaker, we did it with the modernization of the Met Office, with the recruitment of new observers and forecasters and radar technicians, and the installation of a network of Dopplers, which is actually, many people might be very surprised. They are being installed as we speak, but there's no hullabaloo. I wonder why they're not touting it. But they've been installed in Long Island and Abaco, and I believe Mayaguana is next or about to be done, and then Ragged Island. And Speaker, we saw it with the, no, I want you to talk about it. And of course, I've spoken about the unified bus system. The signs are up. They're in the constituency of the member for member for Elizabeth and the member for Seabreeze. I hope they will advocate for the people who live in those communities. They can catch a bus, Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, and so we see it again what we did in the maritime sector, Mr. Speaker. Man, listen, man, you ain't happy with how far ahead you are under this administration. It is unfortunate. You're doing good, man. You want a winning ticket, man. You want a winning ticket. You want a winning ticket. You want a winning ticket now. Oh, yeah. Boy, listen, you got that number. I don't care what you say. Speaker, it's unfortunate that despite the grandiose representations in that interview with the minister, that all of the relevant sections were not to be introduced by him, as he said he would, but are now sitting in his ministry as we speak in this parliament. And all this time, since those comments, we see nothing to redress or address the issues that were raised in that terrible tragedy. Even though he might have done the inspections, and I guess, I don't know if you recruited more manpower, but you have specific laws and regulations sitting there and which have not been activated under this administration. The amendments to the Boat Act would have required certification and licensing of crew, captain, mate, and engineer, the STCW certification, insurance, and also the safety case, which was something that was introduced in this whole suite of legislation where each commercial operator, and I believe also maybe pleasure craft operator, has a safety plan to manage any crisis situations and how things should happen if there is an emergency. The necessity for surveys on inspection is in there. The fact that there no alteration machinery, etc. All of these are in the boat registration amendment rules, which deals with commercial craft. The requirement of the safety case, the safety management plan, etc. And of course, these also apply to commercial fishing vessels. So, you know, there is a compelling urgency for this government to bring these pieces of legislation, particularly in light of what has happened most recently in this country. And Mr. Speaker, you know, and they asked, you know, why we didn't do it. Well, we had it on the agenda, but just before election didn't come through. We did the hard work, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I hear the laughter, you know. I hear the laughter of those who have sat on a complete complement of laws that address issues that are right before our very faces. And they are here laughing about it with such a delinquency. I mean, it is amazing what these members find humorous in this parliament. In 5 years, we did plenty. We did plenty. We did a lot in 5 years, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud of the team that I worked with in the Ministry of Transport. We achieved a lot. But we did, and this was one of them. This is one of the achievements. This is one of the achievements. A full complement of draft bills, which this administration for 2 years is refusing to bring, and which address critical safety issues in the maritime sector in this country. It's wrong. It's wrong, Mr. Speaker. It's wrong, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, you sat on the bills, on these bills, and I tell you, you know, you wonder when you look at what you've actually accomplished, and you could just think that you had this made in the shade sitting there. Just gotta bring it, my Lord. Just bring it. And you have not been able to do that, Mr. Speaker. It speaks volumes, Mr. Speaker. Speaks volumes, Mr. Speaker. Speaks volumes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Speaker. You know, and you know, Mr. Speaker, what is worse? Not only did they not bring they did not bring the bills, but they have stopped a progressive momentum, Mr. Speaker. That momentum should have led to a transformative environment, but because they're now piecemealing it now and leaving critical pieces, they have now interrupted a momentum, and I trust that you'll be able to recover it, but you have actually, I believe, done damage. Oh boy, Speaker. I can't wait for the budget debate to see so we can pull the curtain back for the member East Grand Bahama, all his assertions, all them promises. I can't wait. Your time is coming.
Your time is here.
It's coming.
Your time is here.
Oh, you think it's gone, eh? Oh, boy. One thing I can say with you, St. Hans, you're doing good. Under this watch, this administration, you doing good. I don't know what you got the number, man. You got this in control, man. You doing good. You know, and the whole country is saying that. You're doing really well with this administration. You're doing well, Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, it is too sad that a petty and narrow perspective has been adopted by this administration. And it's for that reason, I believe, and I could be wrong, I believe that they have sacrificed the greater national good so that it does not appear as if it was a prior administration that did these things, and that you don't want to, and that it begins to look as if this is the initiative of this administration, Mr. Speaker. I could be wrong, but this is how it's appearing, because there is no good reason for this delinquency and this negligence, really, on behalf of this administration, Mr. Speaker. It's regressive. And it's the same way you are trying to set back the advances made by Bahamians under the Bahamianization policy. It is a peculiar and narrow mindset.
Honorable members.
Mr. Speaker, this is I can take my food, Mr. Speaker. You say it's for me, I enjoy the background noise. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
honorable
Speaker.
member.
You said this is for me?
I shouldn't
I'm
expect any
accepting.
more complaints then.
No, 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 no. No, you won't. You won't. You have now told Mr. Speaker that for me, this is what I get. So no problem. No problem. No, the speaker is free for the entire parliament. And he said Engliston will be the one who will continue to have this type of an atmosphere because you get what you give. No problem, Speaker.
Honorable member. Honorable member.
Speaker,
See, I have to intervene when you make statements like that, because I made it very clear
Listen, man.
that my statements were applicable to all members.
No, 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 Speaker.
While I was speaking to you, I didn't specifically state that all members will eat what they serve.
Yes, because I trust that when anyone else speaks, they will be subject to what I have been subject in this debate, Trying to speak over everybody non-stop, including members on that side and behind and all around. The country notes it, Mr. Speaker, but like you say, this is Engliston's dessert. So I take it, Mr. Speaker, I don't complain. I won't complain to you again about it either. So you don't have to worry about it, Mr. Speaker. You've already made that plain as to what Engliston is about. So, Mr. Speaker, perhaps you want, and you know, you saw the same thing with how Bahamians are viewed under Bahamianization, the advances made by our Bahamianization policy. And it's peculiar and a narrow mindset that is being exhibited by this administration, Speaker. And so, Speaker, so you wanted, they perhaps wanted to wait 2 years to suggest that they've done it, but in the meantime, you made the country wait 2 years with all of the tragedies and the gaps and the lapses. And, Mr. Speaker, are they telling us that their ego is more important than the progress of our people? Is it deliberate, or is it sheer incompetence? Which one? I'm not sure which one is worse, Mr. Speaker. Are we playing politics? I am, Mr. Speaker, and I'd be grateful for 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker. I'm asking for 2 minutes, Mr. Speaker.
Granted.
Okay, thank you. Man, listen. Listen, you heard me talking about road traffic? Leave me alone, please, okay? Is it, Mr. Speaker? I end by commending these professionals who work in the public service. Politicians tend to believe they're the smartest thing in skin. And that's from Susan Wallace, that's a line from Susan Wallace, poet, one of her poems, My Dog was big and burly. And speakers, they sometimes think that they're the smartest thing in skin. And many tend to devalue and underestimate the value and worth of these Bahamians, public servants, simply because they work in the public service. I stand today to be a testament to the excellence of these people who work in difficult circumstances and long hours, and they are found not just in the Ministry of Transport or the Office of the Attorney General, but throughout the service, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, in finance also. Yeah, in finance. We can test, yes, I know. We tested it when you first took office, when you put your politics in the commentary of the minister. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to commend the public servants who have participated in this exercise and who continue to give their all every day. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to lay a number of draft pieces that deal with the issue at hand, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead. You can name them.
Yes. One is the boat registration, small domestic commercial vessels rules. Today's the 1st of May.
Order that the document be brought up.
The other is the boat registration, domestic cargo ship. Sorry?
Order that the document do lie on the table.
This one deals with domestic cargo ships, Mr. Speaker.
Order that the document be brought up. Order that the document do lie on the table.
And I want to lay, there's an additional, trying to find a speaker, additional,
Forbes, let me see that.
sorry, Speaker, there's merchant shipping amendments. This? Yeah, this is it right here. This is it. I've been looking for this, yeah. Merchant shipping training and certification. This is about what I spoke about the manning and training of crew. The whole objective is to bring about a higher standard of safety in the sector. That's it.
Order that the documents be
Thank you,
brought up.
Speaker. These are the Merchant Shipping Maritime Labor Convention Amendments Regulations. And so, Mr. Speaker, the only thing I would say, Mr. Speaker, I await the
Order that the documents do lie on the table.
Speaker, I await the resolution on the issue about the straw market, and I trust that will happen very urgently, Mr. Speaker, because my reputation has been tarnished, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable
Thank
Member.
you, Speaker.
The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Carmichael.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I'm grateful to your office for providing a copy of the transcript of this morning's proceedings. It says this morning I raised a...
Honorable Member, just a moment. Honorable Member, Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Carmichael.
Is that the Speaker?
Oh, boy.
Speaker, this morning I raised a point of order. And I raised a point of order while the member for Angleston was speaking. I'm grateful to you for hearing me. I have seen the transcript of this morning's proceedings, and I want to refer you to a portion of it, sir. It's only 2 pages. But the first page, the honorable member for Angleston spoke about our correspondence on the 4th of January, which is an interesting date. And if you go on to the second page of the transcript,
Yes,
the sentence begins, and, well, I'll just read it, sir.
yes.
And some, says some of the concerns they have, Mr. Speaker. She's speaking about the straw market vendors. And she's speaking about some of their concerns, is that the authority is not fair. That's what she said. At that stage, I stood up. But even though I was recognized, the member continued, and she said, levying fees is not permitted by law. Straw market is not requiring a submission. And then she was going on, and she stopped. So the basic allegation that she made is that the straw market authority is not fair to some of these vendors. And then that was one of the allegations that she was making. I provided you, sir, with a copy of a writ. Interestingly enough, it was filed on the 4th of January, the same date that the member said that she wrote me and was awaiting a response. But obviously, this writ was filed notwithstanding that. Mr. Speaker, this writ, I don't want to call the name of the plaintiff, but it is common ground that the plaintiff is a straw vendor. The first defendant is the Straw Market Authority. The second defendant is the chairman of the Straw Market Authority. The third defendant is the Honorable Thomas Desmond Bannister, Minister of Public Works. The fourth defendant is the Honorable Carl Bethel, the Attorney General. And if you looked at the endorsement, and the pleadings are not set out in full, it's an endorsement of the pleadings. And so a statement of claim, as I'm sure it will probably come at another stage, I don't know. But if you look at so in paragraphs 1, 2, and 3, it set out who the parties are. And this says, paragraph 4 says, the plaintiff claims against the defendant's loss of profits and damages ensuing from the actions of the first defendant through the second defendant and or its servants or agents by wrongfully suspending the plaintiff's right to operate the aforesaid stall for a period in excess of 15 days, contrary to the Straw Market Act, I don't know if that's an act, but general regulations aforesaid, and thereby depriving the plaintiff of income for the said period in breach of contract and in violation of the aforesaid regulations. Mr. Speaker, this is an allegation of purported unfairness. This is an allegation that says that the Straw Market Authority unfairly, wrongly, wrongfully, whatever, suspended somebody, suspended their right to operate their stall for a period of in excess of 15 days, contrary to the regulations, and unfairly deprived the plaintiff of income for that period, unfairly in breach of contract, unfairly in violation of regulations. And I'm just reading unfairly in because that's how it would have to be read. But yeah, yeah. So, Mr. Speaker, you, like myself, an attorney, you are a member of the bar. This allegation here, even though it's only an endorsement, is an allegation by a straw vendor filed in the courts, where the court is going to have to adjudicate on the issue as to whether or not myself, as the minister, the Attorney General, the Chairman, the Straw Market Authority, were fair to this person in the manner in which they conducted themselves. It's a matter that's sub judice, it's a matter before the courts, and that is the reason why I raised the issue. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Angleton.
Mr. Speaker, I am amazed at the member that he would seek to make such a spurious argument, that you use a word unfair relating to something completely disconnected, that I cannot address an issue, and I'm going to lay this letter in the Parliament for everyone, the whole world to see, a letter I wrote to him on the 4th of January about the straw market, where I said that they were unfair in a number of ways, that they were levying fees not permitted by law. And I go through a whole list. Has nothing to do with an action. The member alleged in here, asserted that I, like an ambulance chaser, came into this Parliament. No, that's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. To try and promote and pursue and prosecute a legal action which has nothing to do with the issue I'm raising. It doesn't matter what date it was written on. There are two, I'm going to lay the letter. Two completely different matters. And you will see in this letter, there's no reference to anything in that writ, because this is written on behalf of the Straw Market Authority, the Straw Market Vendors Association. This is written on behalf of the association, nothing to do with an individual in the straw market. But the member accused me of coming in here to get some unfair advantage, and it's really tacky, man. It's tacky.
Honorable member, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael.
Continues to take liberties in this Parliament, sir. Yes. Deliberately. Yes. They are deliberate, Mr. Speaker. I made no such accusation. I made no such allegation. I made no allegation that you were acting like an ambulance chaser. I stood up and I indicated that there is a matter before the court which would concern anybody, and it would influence the court. And I did not say you were trying to influence the court. I said it would influence the court. It would have the effect of influencing the court, and because of that, you ought not to say it.
Honorable member, if I can bring this matter to a conclusion. Both of you are senior attorneys, and both of you would agree that this is a generally endorsed writ.
No, I would agree with that. That's nothing to do with the letter. Here, I'm going to lay this in
I'm not finished.
May I lay this, Mr. Speaker, so you get the full picture of what I was referring to?
Honorable member, could you have your seat while I'm speaking?
I just want the balance.
Honorable member,
I want fairness, Mr. Speaker.
I'm giving you fairness. This is a generally endorsed writ. You would agree.
Nothing to do with what I was talking about.
Honorable member,
Nothing to do.
a generally endorsed writ usually lays out a general claim with specifics to follow in a statement of claim. Until that statement of claim is produced, none of us would be aware of the specifics of the claim. So, the general scope, this is the opinion of the chair, the general scope, honorable member,
Allow the whole picture to be laid. I was referring to a letter in my notes.
honorable member, you will have an opportunity.
Use that way to get.
This is a generally endorsed writ.
Nothing to do with what I'm talking about.
The paragraph 4 of the writ, it says generally what the plaintiff would be alleging. And the writ is indeed against the first defendant is the Straw Market Authority.
Something different. I have it right here.
And so, in the circumstances, so as to not be prejudicial to any matter before the Supreme Court, the chair would order that no discussion be made in Parliament with respect to a matter that is before the Supreme Court in this generally endorsed writ form.
I agree, Mr. Speaker. I agree. And I never sought to do that. That is the point. I wrote a letter to the minister on behalf of the Straw Business Person Society. They have concerns about the operation of the straw market. I was referring to it. In fact, the transcript is only partial. It doesn't speak to my reference to this letter. I was not referring to the person named in there. It's a completely different issue.
Honorable member,
This has nothing to do with that.
honorable member, I have a question. Is there any reference in that letter to the Straw Market Authority?
Relative to undisconnected matters, nothing
No,
to do with
but
that.
the
So I
point-
can't talk about straw market
The
authority
point
in here?
the point is, the Straw Market Authority is named as a defendant
Yeah.
with respect to issues being raised in that letter.
No, nothing to do with the issues raised in this letter. Nothing to do with the issues raised in this letter, and the member knows it. May I lay the letter, Mr. Speaker, so you can see what's raised in the letter? It has nothing to do with that action.
Honorable member,
May I lay the letter, Mr. Speaker?
would you like to read paragraph 4 of this generally endorsed writ?
Speaker, would you like to read my letter? I know it's in that, Mr. Speaker. I've read paragraph 4. It deals, because this is a specific issue with a specific straw vendor. This is written by the Straw Vendors Association about issues in the operation, hours of operation, levying of fees, nothing to do with that incident.
Honorable member,
General operation.
I'm going to give an order from the chair.
Okay, can I lay this on? I'd like to lay this, please, Mr. Speaker. Just as he's laid that, I'd like the
Order that the document
Thank
be
you.
brought up.
And I'd like you to review it, Mr. Speaker, before you make a determination.
An honorable member, we have another difficulty. This letter that you are seeking to table is a without prejudice letter.
All right, Mr. Speaker, leave it alone, Mr. Speaker, leave it alone, okay? I'd like to hear your ruling, Speaker, I'd like to hear your ruling, whether what I was raising has anything to do with that action. That's what I'm interested in, Mr. Speaker, because the member said I came in this Parliament and did something that was improper, and I would like to hear your ruling, whether what I raised in that letter has anything to do with that action, which I did not raise in this Parliament, did not allude to in any shape or form. I have been speaking about the straw market for 2 years in this Parliament.
My
The record will reflect.
ruling, honorable member, is this. In the circumstances of a generally endorsed writ, with no further evidence before me as the chair, it is practically impossible for me to determine specifically that this writ would not cover any specific allegations that may come forward as a result of this writ.
So, Mr. Speaker, can I ask you then, having regard to the fact...
This
Listen, I
this
think you need to
generally
help,
endorsed,
okay? This ain't the cabinet, man. This is not the cabinet.
Honorable
This
member.
is not the cabinet. You ain't in
honorable
charge
member,
here.
can you resume?
You're not in charge here. This ain't the cabinet.
And as a result, The chair, the chair would not permit any further discussion on this particular matter that could have a prejudicial effect. And secondly, with respect to the tabling of this without prejudice letter, in my estimation, that would be very improper to permit this letter to be tabled.
I did not raise the action, the member did. He's the only one that raised the action, Speaker. And I'd ask that he struck from the record all of his comments relative to that action, Mr. Speaker. I did not raise any action. I raised the letter dealing with totally disconnected matters. And I would ask that his comments about me relative to a disconnected action, which I did not allude to, I think what the member did, he was premature in his objection. I think that's what the problem is, and he really should, take responsibility.
Honorable member, this is the final position that I'm going to prepare. Prepared this letter that is without prejudice, with a generally endorsed writ before me. Listen to these sentences. We are advised that some of the aforesaid instances are the authority, which is the first defendant in this matter, is levying fees not permitted by law.
That's nothing to do with
Right.
the action. Nothing to do with the action.
This action is against the authority that you're making reference to.
No, it says what his cause of action is, Mr. Speaker. It says it's closing, it's keeping the person out of their...
Honorable member, resume your seat. It is the ruling of the chair that
No, I don't, I leave it there. I don't No, I can leave it on the record. I just need to-
you are not leaving that on the record because I'm not accepting a without prejudice letter to be tabled.
I'm going to accept it with summons.
The ruling is that the chair will not entertain any further discussions on this matter that could have a prejudicial effect on this writ CLE Gen 0008 of 2019.
Am I able to refer to the straw matter authority ever in this parliament, ever, while that action is going on? So I want to understand the ruling. Am I able to refer to the straw
Honorable
matter
member.
authority in this parliament?
Honorable member, resume your seat.
No, I'm asking, Speaker, can I refer to the straw matter?
I just specifically said with respect to CLE Gen 008 2009.
I never referred to it. The member referred to
Honorable member, resume your seat. We would like to proceed. We have in our midst today a number of consul generals who are representatives of our nation in other jurisdictions, and at this time I'd like to recognize them. Firstly, the Consul General for the Miami, Florida area, Miss Linda Mackey. Stand so we can see who you are. Consul General for Atlanta, Miss Astra Roll. And a man familiar with this place, Consul General for Washington, D.C., Mr. Theo Neely. Thank you. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I sought not to interrupt the member for Engliston while she gave her contribution, but I thought this to be an appropriate time, Mr. Speaker, to rise and request from the honorable member that she withdraws her statement in regards to me, or perhaps that statement be struck from the record. You see, Mr. Speaker, because the member for Engliston said that the fact that there's legislation in the Ministry of Transport that has not been brought to this House The fact that it's not been brought to this House is perhaps due to sheer incompetence.
No, I didn't say competence, I said negligence.
Negligence, incompetence.
Negligence worse?
Because you see, Mr. Speaker, if the matrix for sheer negligence is having legislation in your ministry, which has not been brought to this House and passed, then the member would be indicting herself. Because she stood up all during her debate to lament the fact that she left pieces and pieces and pieces of legislation inside the Ministry of Transport. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would request of that honorable member that she withdraw that reference to me. Because, Mr. Speaker, if she doesn't, then by all accounts, she would most be indicting herself. You see, because, Mr. Speaker, I've only been the Minister of Transport and Local Government for 10 months.
Who you trying to blame?
I became the Minister of Transport and Local Government on the 1st of July and brought these pieces of legislation on the 26th of July. And not 10 years, not 5, 10 non-consecutive years.
I work with you, man. I know how to.
Okay? Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, the legislation of which he spoke, the Road Traffic Act, I brought that 3 months after the Honorable Prime Minister gave me this permit. So I would, we passed it, we passed it, we passed it, the amendments. Mr. Speaker, I just request of the honorable member that she does the honorable thing, eh? Thank you.
Chair, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Angleston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member is speaking to the fact that let me just say, this is my view, and I understand the member's been there for 10 months. And it's the Minister of Transport, I can say the member for Bamboo Town, but the Minister of Transport under this administration, whether it's Bamboo Town, whether it's Southern Shores, whoever it is, has for 2 years sat on legislation, particularly in the face of some very serious events that have happened, Mr. Speaker, very serious events which have been compelling in terms of mandating the bringing of the legislation. The bills that we did was a comprehensive, multifaceted, huge across-the-board involvement, which led to completed bills, unfortunately, which occurred approximate to the general elections. We weren't able to bring it, but we worked on it for 2 or 3 years. And it's what the member is now able, that's why he was able to bring these bills here today. That's the product of that work. And so, yes, we weren't able to bring it, but we were able to do significant groundwork to cause for this member to bring exact word for word, the exact thing before this Parliament. So it's not personal to the member, but 2 years without bringing it, and particularly right in the aftermath of that event, I think it's egregious, Mr. Speaker. On the other point, Mr. Speaker, the issue of the Road Traffic Act, the member has not brought the Road Traffic Act. You brought amendments to the 1958 Act. I'm speaking to a bill which addressed the issues the Prime Minister expressed concern about. He said he's concerned about the penalties for vehicular homicide. And I'm saying, in the draft bill, it deals with, I spoke about it in the debate 2 weeks ago. You were right here. I'm speaking about that bill, because the Prime Minister himself is saying the law is deficient. So I'm asking you, and so I'm not, what you're talking about now is something different. I'm not talking about what you brought it a couple of weeks ago. I'm talking about the revamped bill. So unfortunately, I cannot withdraw it, because it seems to me that if you sit on it for 2 years, particularly in the aftermath of a very compelling incident, I have a view about that. I think that it's egregious, Mr. Speaker. That's my view.
The honorable member was concerned, I think, with the word, he said incompetent, you said you use negligence. And you're not prepared to withdraw the word negligence.
I don't think that I have to, but I would withdraw it if it makes him more comfortable. I think it's egregious. If negligence is offensive, in some shape or form, I withdraw it, and I will substitute the word egregious. I think it is egregious, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, as always, Mr. Speaker, it is an honor and a privilege to rise on behalf of the magnificent people of Exumas, the long-suffering people of Ragged Island, to make a contribution in this place, Mr. Speaker. Being upfront, contributing to debate on the Commercial Recreation Water Sports Amendment Bill 2018 and the Water Skiing and Motorboat Control Amendment Bill 2018. I'll say that we support, Mr. Speaker, as the member for Angliston pointed out, I support in principle the need for these bills and the need for these amendments. Some of them, as the member for Angliston pointed out, are indeed long overdue. And I understand and I thank past and current administrations for their diligence in these matters. However, Mr. Speaker, the bills themselves have a few issues that I hope earnest debate will make clear. In fact, I have a fundamental issue with the Motorboat Control Amendment Bill, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. I don't really subscribe to the philosophy of things coming to the House and looking perfect and being stamped and all on the other side standing in favor without making an effort to make these bills better and to raise issues that may not have been considered by the government and trust that the other side consider them maturely in the interest of better legislation. And while I'll point out what I believe are some of these issues, I don't intend to belabor my contribution, Mr. Speaker, but I want to make two general points. Firstly, the member for Freetown spoke about how booming the tourism industry is. And I'd like to remind him of that large hotel on Cable Beach called Bahama. And I'd also like to remind him of the booming U.S. economy, both of which have played a significant impact in the favor of Bahamian tourism. And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, an element that I have not introduced before are the swimming pigs of the island of Exuma. The original swimming pigs, Mr. Speaker, of the island of Exuma. Mr. Speaker, as I reflected on these matters, it was tempting, Mr. Speaker, to relive the tragic incident on the island of Exuma. But I thought I would be circumspect under the circumstance. But I would reflect, Mr. Speaker, that having become a new member of Parliament, I was confronted very quickly by two very serious tragedies. Firstly, Hurricane Irma in Ragged Island, and secondly, the boating tragedy in Exuma. Both of them brought great pain and also great fortune, Mr. Speaker. And as a new member of Parliament, I was going to say that I had a baptism by fire, Mr. Speaker. But then it occurred to me that the torch does not burn hot where I come from, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, when I look at these both tragedies, there was a story or two stories of heroism. Communities working together, using crisis to become stronger, and the awakening of the Bahamian spirit, Mr. Speaker. So instead of reflecting of the details on that day, I'd like to reflect on those points that I believe we all appreciate as leaders in our country. Mr. Speaker, these incidences ring far and wide. And in the case of the Exuma matter, our loss may have been less tangible than that of some of the families, and not so permanent, but still precious to us, Mr. Speaker. The trust we had built with the public, the international community, with our guests and others, was lost. And we've worked hard, Mr. Speaker, to build that back. And we have. And we hope and we pray that an accident like this will never happen again. And our thoughts and our prayers continue to go out to all of the families locally and abroad who were adversely impacted. Mr. Speaker, I recognize that the matter is before the court, and I therefore make no further reference to that specific event. However, Mr. Speaker, there are many incidents out there that don't make the news. We must therefore do all in our power in this place to protect those out there. However, Mr. Speaker, we must take care on how we exercise our power. We have to protect the public, but we also must have balance in protecting those who operate in the industry so as not to unnecessarily compromise their livelihoods or offend their constitutional rights. So let's take a look at what we have, Mr. Speaker. I'll begin with the Commercial Recreation Watercraft Amendment. In Section 2, Part 2, it says, and I read, that the minister can approve an insurer not licensed or registered in the Bahamas to do insurance business. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to point out that this conflicts with the Insurance Act and is in fact not best practice. This is a Section 2, Part 2. I believe it's the definition. There is a reason why this is not allowed to happen. And it's mainly so that the competent authority, Insurance Commission of the Bahamas in this case, can vet these persons and companies coming into our jurisdiction, ensuring that they are fit and proper and have the wherewithal to conduct business in this jurisdiction. These amendments today, Mr. Speaker, further, on a different note, expand the definition of craft. And I'm going to assume that this covers tour boats like the ones that conduct swimming pig tours, since these are recreational watercrafts. Mr. Speaker, many young Bahamian men in particular have created robust businesses with such boats, and we want to make sure that they are protected and treated fairly in this legislation. Also, we need to be sure that water sports, Mr. Speaker, are reserved for Bahamians. And this, in my view, should be spelled out in law. If we can entrench rights to foreigners in the Commercial Enterprises Act and the on-again, off-again immigration amendments bill, then it shouldn't be too much to ask on an issue to say in this legislation that a part of the requirement for conducting water sports in the Bahamas and having a license to do so is being Bahamian. What I am alarmed about now is how many foreign crafts and foreign persons are entering the Bahamas and allegedly conducting tours and fishing expeditions for pay, with presumably no permit, and operating crafts for hire, and the enforcement on this is limited. Many such incidences are reported. And it is alleged that many of it happens under the noses of the Port Department, Mr. Speaker. However, it appears that not enough is done to police it. And a general concern about enforcement accompanies all of this. One of the major problems now is enforcement. Yes, we need new laws, but I wish we could be satisfied that the Port Department is effectively using the measures it now has on the books. There are laws on the books, Mr. Speaker, that are not being enforced. Additional legislation, if not enforced, will not help the situation one iota, Mr. Speaker. So we must beef up the Port Department with proper resources and expertise. Mr. Speaker, I pause to give tribute to the many hard-working men and women who work for the Port Department. But I say we must beef it up with more resources and even more expertise across the Bahamas. As it stands now in Exuma and elsewhere across the Bahamas, inspections are not timely. And I have had complaints come to my office where businessmen wait for weeks and sometimes months for a decision on licensing and inspection and or registration. This is inefficient, but also encourages non-compliance, as people still do need to make a living and feed their families. Mr. Speaker, on the question of enforcement, the Exumas, as you know, spans some 112 nautical miles from Hull Key in the southeast to Ship Channel Key in the northwest. And in that span, there are 365 keys, one for every day of the week, Mr. Speaker. The Jumento Keys, of which Ragged Island is a part, spans around 100 nautical miles from Hull Key to Duncantown. 212 nautical miles is the scope of the Exuma and Ragged Island constituency, Mr. Speaker. It is no small feat for law enforcement, and I commend our officers who risk their lives each day to protect us and our resources. However, Mr. Speaker, we can and we must do a better job. We also need a more efficient joint enforcement unit to maximize limited resources. Speaker, I wrote to the esteemed Deputy Prime Minister sometime in 2017. I copied the Minister of Immigration, along with the member for Garden Hills, who has ministerial responsibility for public service and some interest in this general area, Mr. Speaker.
Oh boy.
Recommending that there be a joint marine unit with RBPF, RBDF, the Port Department, Customs Department, Immigration and Fisheries, Mr. Speaker. I renew that call today because it simply makes sense. I foreshadowed a unit that would significantly improve government revenues, and as we know, we have a $1 billion problem there, Mr. Speaker. But not only will it enhance government revenues, it will reduce various breaches in the Exuma and the Jumento Keys. But I have not gotten a reply, Mr. Speaker, and I trust that this matter is in hand. It's taken a while, but I believe it should be done because it simply makes sense to do. I also want to point out that the issue of poaching by pleasure crafts is allegedly a major one. We target the rickety Dominican vessels, but the 150-foot azimuth yacht with the walk-in freezer goes undetected because of lack of resources, because of lack of intelligence gathering perhaps, and a lack of follow-up of leads provided by local fishermen and locals in the area, because I would imagine that law enforcement in this area is under-resourced. So, Mr. Speaker, I repeat the call today for this Marine unit, a joint Marine unit in the Exuma Keys and the Jumento Keys. When we look at Section 8A, 3A of the Commercial Watercraft Amendments Bill, I have an issue with this clause as well, Mr. Speaker. It's a little broad for me. And this would cause someone who was convicted of an offense in relation to driving or use of a craft to not qualify for a license, no matter how minor it may be. Section 8A, 3A, the Commercial Watercraft Amendments Bill, Mr. Speaker. This would cause one who was convicted, as I read it, of an offense, no matter how minor, in relation to driving or use of a craft, to not qualify for a license. So let's imagine if this applied to tow cars or taxis, Mr. Speaker. We must examine this. Why would we do it for a minor offense? We seem to be, by virtue of overreach, risking making criminals out of people, Mr. Speaker. When you take their livelihood away, what should we expect that they will do? And while we're on this topic, Mr. Speaker, let me add that I read the other day that, and I heard earlier from one minister on the other side, that the Marijuana Commission wants an extension in delivering its report to the government. Mr. Speaker, for the life of me in 2019, I still don't understand why the status quo on these issues remain, and why we still have laws arresting and charging and convicting persons with possession of small quantities of marijuana, which ultimately results in the criminalizing meanly of our young men. This is failed policy, Mr. Speaker. And no doubt we will come to this, and no doubt we will define what small quantities should be. And no doubt, Mr. Speaker, we will set the guidelines on these issues to ensure social responsibility. Not only should we stop this immediately across the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, but we need to re-examine in this place as soon as possible and practical the quantities that meet the threshold of possession with intent to supply, Mr. Speaker. Absolutely not. And, Mr. Speaker, we as a matter of national urgency should examine the laws and the guidelines to expunge the records of all those convicted of possession of small quantities, to be determined and defined, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking about the unintended consequences of making criminals out of people, Mr. Speaker. As responsible leaders, we must take care, Mr. Speaker, not to make criminals out of our young men and women. We're giving these people criminal records, forcing them into the underworld, as they can't get jobs, they can't obtain U.S. visas to travel to the U.S. And I am a proponent, Mr. Speaker, of personal responsibility as well. But I say, what do we expect when we impose the unintended consequence of making criminals out of our young men. We have to address this in our parliament, Mr. Speaker, and I listened earlier, and I support the legalization of medical cannabis, as I said before. And I repeat, I support the decriminalization of small amounts of recreational marijuana. The world has moved on this issue, Mr. Speaker. And it may be a risky position, but it's my position, Mr. Speaker. I know the Minister of Health, no, I've never smoked, and neither have I inhaled, Mr. Speaker. And by the way, I also support amending the laws permitting the over-the-counter sale of CBD products, Mr. Speaker. And the minister must have been telepathic today. But he conceded that there aren't psychotropic effects, as evidenced by the great body of work, Mr. Speaker. I raised these issues to make the point that in our doings in this House, we must take care not to criminalize our young people as an unintended consequence. Mr. Speaker, I digress. But we must ensure that our punitive standards on minor offenses do not impose these consequences for ordinarily law-abiding citizens. Getting back to the bill, when we look at section 8A3B, it says in the opinion of the authority, the person is not a suitable person to be registered owner, that he won't get a registration or a license, Mr. Speaker. I paraphrase. But that part leaves this open for potential abuse as well, and I invite the other side to look at 8A3B. There should at least be some sort of appeal process, Mr. Speaker, and it ought not be the minister. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's take a look at the water skiing and motorboat control amendments. I don't have an issue with increasing fines for reckless driving of a motorboat or a jet ski. In fact, I think this provision was long overdue. But I think this may be misstating, in my view, my knowledge, what the fine currently is, and we may wish to take a look at that as well. But I have no issue with dramatically raising it to $2,000 or higher, Mr. Speaker. That brings me to section 5 of the amendment, which changes section 11 of the current act. I believe here is where we have potentially a serious issue. The change to 11 appears to fly in the face of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, according to certain QCs that I draw on. 11? Coming to it, yes, in the commercial water spot. As I'm sure the lawyers in this place would be aware, Article 15 and Article 21 of our supreme law, the Constitution, provides for the protection for the security and privacy of persons and their individual home and other property. Article 27, 1, talks about protection of property. And I invite this administration to take a look at 27.1e that speaks specifically to the type of circumstances and perhaps clean up the language on this issue. You see, Mr. Speaker, when we look, and I see the member for Michael looking intently, when we look at section 5, 11C1A.
Honorable members, I'm following along as well. Are you referring to the water skiing and motorcraft, motorboat control amendment bill?
Let me just,
I think
Section 5, Mr. Speaker, of the, Speaker, if I might just have a pause on my time for a minute
Sure.
as I help you to locate where I am.
Yes.
When we look at Section 5 of the Water Skiing Motor Boat Control Amendments Bill, as I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, when we look at Section 5, when we look at 11C 1A, yes, indeed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I know the exceptions. I'm inviting you to look at this again because, Mr. Speaker, what we're doing here today is we're giving port inspectors who already have powers on the sea. We're giving them powers on the land, as I understand it. And the only thing they need is reasonable assurance that a boat exists there. A boat is located there. It's not assurance, Mr. Speaker, of one of those issues pointed out by Sinans, I believe, in 27(1)(e) of the Constitution. It's not saying with reasonable assurance or reasonable cause or reasonable suspicion, reasonable grounds that a boat is located there. Not necessarily that there is reasonable grounds that an offense is being committed or an offense has been committed. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm inviting the other side to take a look at it. And if the legal experts of the Attorney General's office, Mr. Speaker, is not satisfied on review, Mr. Speaker, I ask that they pursue a further amendment to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that we are not empowering these persons who become inspectors, Mr. Speaker, to have this type of authority on the land. Mr. Speaker, in my view, in my layman's view, I believe this provision brings some cause, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I will invite the other side to look at these issues, Mr. Speaker. If the Attorney General is so satisfied, Mr. Speaker, then I will concede the point, Mr. Speaker. But I am not an attorney, but this is troubling for the layman, Mr. Speaker, and it's troubling for many, and I invite you, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we are not encroaching on any constitutional rights of our citizens. But until that is done, Mr. Speaker, until that review is undertaken, Mr. Speaker, I will continue to have this concern. Mr. Speaker, it appears to me that the powers granted may be too wide. Also, Mr. Speaker, how does this not run afoul of the Data Protection Act, that an inspector can access anything from any system in my boat or business, as the case may be, or its equipment without some order from the court? And again, Mr. Speaker, also in 11H, Mr. Speaker, it talks about how a person may appeal to the minister within 14 days. But there's no time frame in which the minister must respond. And then, Mr. Speaker, the recourse is to the minister, a politician, Mr. Speaker. Meantime, an inspector may have grounded the motorcraft, which might form the basis of the livelihood for the individual making the complaint or the appeal. This again can have an adverse impact on a person's life and deprive them potentially of their ability to provide for themselves. Of course, Mr. Speaker. With these amendments, the powers, in my view, might be too wide and encompassing for safety officers, Mr. Speaker. And no doubt, Mr. Speaker, no doubt they will have some training. But I would like to see the appeal to be to the courts rather than to a politician, Mr. Speaker. And what are the requisite requirements for training, Mr. Speaker? These are my views, Mr. Speaker. I believe it provides some risk in reality to the people on the ground who operate in this business and who, if laid up for 2 weeks while the minister deliberates for 14 or 24 days or 4 months, Mr. Speaker, if they are in fact innocent, Mr. Speaker, will not have a recourse of a prompt response from the minister. The Speaker, I look with interest as there's seemingly some concern about mandating the minister to respond within 14 days when a local makes an appeal to the minister, Mr. Speaker. But this same administration had no issue with mandating the Minister of Immigration of responding in 14 days or work permit having deemed to have been granted, Mr. Speaker. So what I'm asking is for some appreciation of the local context, Mr. Speaker. And the local context is that the small man and woman on the ground who make their living from these crafts, Mr. Speaker, cannot afford to be laid up extensively whilst the minister deliberates in an open-ended manner. Mr. Speaker, yes, I support the need for oversight. Yes, I support the need for regulations. But, Mr. Speaker, we also have a duty of care to protect the fundamental rights of our citizens. We have a duty of care, Mr. Speaker, to protect our industries, Mr. Speaker. And I believe that some of these amendments are way too far-reaching, and we ought to have some concern. And I invite the other side, Mr. Speaker, to take another look. Take another look, Mr. Speaker. Take another look, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we are striking the kind of balance, the balance that's required, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, the Exuma Tour Operators Association also has no issue with oversight. They have no issue with regulation, Mr. Speaker. And I commend them for having banded together in forming this association, Mr. Speaker, whom I've had occasion to meet with. And I commend Mr. Anthony Richardson for having been elected president of this association and for his leadership, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we recognize that we must consistently and continually improve our game. Mr. Speaker, these industrious young men have built an industry with their bare hands, with very little resources. They support and they recognize the ongoing need not for regulation and law, but also to self-regulate and to continue to step up their game. Let there be no mistake that this group, Mr. Speaker, recognizes the potential adverse impact of a lack of regulation and generally support reasonable regulations, Mr. Speaker. You know, as I close, the Exuma Keys, Mr. Speaker, continue to be the most fascinating waters in the world, Mr. Speaker. And Exuma Keys are swiftly becoming the #1 boating mecca of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. Notwithstanding what they say up north, Mr. Speaker. The Exuma Keys are some of the most fascinating and magnificent places on planet Earth, Mr. Speaker. And we are collectively committed. We are collectively committed to protecting it, Mr. Speaker. We're collectively committed to protecting our industries, and we are collectively committed to the rule of law and to sensible regulations. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I say those words and I thank you for the opportunity on behalf of the magnificent people of Exuma and the long-suffering people of Ragged Island. I thank you once again for this opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. As many? Chair recognizes the honorable member for Mount Moriah.
Fred, what a big sense. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I wrap up, and I promise you that I would be extremely brief, would like to think it would be remiss of me if I failed to acknowledge and to extend my sincerest condolences to the family of Petty Officer Percival Philip Propol, a 30-year veteran of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, who lost his life early Sunday morning. Our thoughts and prayers are with his parents, Percival and Lenora Propol, his 4 children, Commodore Bethel, and officers of Marines of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, and his extended family and loved ones, friends, as they grapple with this disturbing occurrence of his untimely death. May the soul of Petty Officer Propol and the souls of all of the faithfully departed rest in peace. Like so many in this unfortunate event, cause us all to pause, Mr. Speaker, and reflect on how our society is changing. It has also left many unanswered questions, particularly from his immediate family. How could it be possible for a Bahamian hero, whose legacy as a family man and a community leader was taken away so tragically while serving his country? I could not help but observe the outpouring of love and support extended to his family during their time of bereavement. During a recent visit at the home, there was a constant flow of sympathizers, many of whom reminisce on the occasion in which he gave freely of his time and talent to build up the common good of those he encountered. He truly exemplified the values and beliefs that we all should aspire to achieve through our actions. The investigations, Mr. Speaker, into this matter is progressing well, and rest assured that this, like all other criminal matters, will be thoroughly investigated. The resolve will be to determine what happened, why it happened, and if there were any breaches or failures in security protocols. While the event is certainly a shocking tragedy, it is also an opportunity for more stringent and effective measures to secure all government assets and personnel. Coincidentally, Mr. Speaker, my ministry had already begun to explore a model framework for 21st century safety and security procedures and practices for all high-profile officials and government assets. Experts with diverse technical backgrounds have begun to examine the circumstances surrounding the unfortunate event. The goal is to ensure that Government House and other key locations are kept secure. Mr. Speaker, there was also another unfortunate incident the weekend past on the island of Bimini the honorable member for Elizabeth would have spoken to this issue from a specific angle. The murder of Mr. Alain Perez, an American and owner of Big John's Bar and Grill. We pray for his family and would like to assure that no efforts would be spared to bring this heinous act to closure. While incidents such as this one are rare in our country, we all understand the potential devastating impact of an incident like this and that it can have on a nation's economy. Mr. Speaker, at this time I would like to certainly thank the Almighty God and to the great people of the great constituency of Mount Moriah and wish them all certainly a blessed day, and to remind them of the Prime Minister's town hall meeting tonight at the Edmund Moxie Center for the constituents of my constituency, Mount Moriah, in addition to St. Barnabas, Bainstown, Angliston, and am I missing out any? Centerville, and that's it, and Fort Charlotte. And so we asked all within hearing of my voice from all of those constituencies to come out tonight and to hear from our nation's leader on the great things that are happening in this country and to celebrate the future. Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss if I failed to speak to, for just a brief moment, of what I would refer to as a could have, would have, all talk and no action opposition. When they were the government just a few short years ago, they wasted 5 years of the people's time focusing on special interest groups while doing nothing to advance the cause of the average Bahamian. But today, when you listen, Mr. Speaker, to the side opposite, they have all of the answers. They would have done all of the work prior to 2 years ago. And if you listen to them, they now left what they would have accomplished for us to deliver. So, Mr. Speaker, if you believe that, and let's say if you do, if you believe that, then I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. But what I can say, Mr. Speaker, for those Bahamians out there who are listening and who continue to listen to this opposition from day to day, they must be wondering, where is the opposition in this country? Because it seems to me, Mr. Speaker, that all they speak to is what they could have done or would have done. And they spend most of the people's time outside of these hollow walls. And what they should have done. Right? What they should have done. But yet, they feel that that is good enough to prepare them to lead this country in the next 3 years. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamian people know better. For the last 2 years, the Minutes administration has been working assiduously to return in respectability back to this country. You know, we were in the abyss. We were on a downslide of no return. We had fallen into a blue hole with no hope. Of coming and being rescued. But the Bahamian people knew better, Mr. Speaker. And so 2 years ago, they decided that no more. Because another 5 years of that group, we would have been more than just blacklisted. We would have been purple listed. And so, when the side opposite, whenever they're here, and it's, for me, Mr. Speaker, I don't know what to say. But hopefully they will get the recording. I guess my communications now come by way of recording to the side opposite. But the member for Exuma and Ragged Island, before he decided to leave, and I'm disappointed in him, Mr. Speaker, because I too am new to this place. And before I made a commitment to enter frontline politics, one of the things that I dedicated myself to was this, that I will continue to remain true to myself. But when you listen to the comments from the member for Exuma, one would think that he may have been advising the former government for many years, because it seems to me that everything that they did is all good to him. But the Bahamian people will decide in 3 years. So let's get to the act. The member for Exuma and Ragged Island made note that we must be careful while enacting this piece of legislation not to, in his words, not to push behind the average Bahamian. And his words, to protect those persons in the industry. But Mr. Speaker, that is the reason why we're here today. That is the reason why we're enacting this bill today. Because in order to protect the industry, then we must ensure that we take all measures to protect those people who support the industry. Because without them, Mr. Speaker, there is no industry. And that's what is extremely important for us, for all of us to understand. Without the people who are supporting the industry, that is, the persons who, for the most part, visit this country in search of fun and search of relaxation, if they are not protected, then you have no industry. And so it's incumbent upon us, as legislators, as leaders, as persons who would have been voted in, to ensure that we take the necessary measures. And I commend my dear brother for the good work that he is doing. I commend him for bringing this bill to Parliament. Not in 5 years, but in a few months. Because And so, Bambootown, you ought to be commended. Because we are sick and tired, Mr. Speaker, of the complaints that continue to resonate from persons who continue to visit this country and continue to have bad experiences at the hands of not the good water sports operators, because the vast majority of them are hard-working, committed family persons who are working to put bread on the table for their families. The purpose of this bill is to deal with that minority, right? The bad apples, right? Who do not have a license, do not have a vessel, right? But are just there to be disruptive and to put a scar on this nation that we cannot afford to maintain. That's what this legislation is all about. That's who this legislation is directed toward. And we make no apology for it. The member for Exuma, if you listen to him, supported the bill, but was very, it seems as if he was totally against it. But if you listen to the member from Angleton, just shortly before him, she was lauding the bill and how it was a production of their government. And so the question then is, then what is it? Who got the wrong memo? Because obviously they're on different parts of this. Someone got the wrong memo. But I believe it was Exuma who got the right memo, because as he was speaking on referencing certain section of the bill, he said that on advice of my legal advisor, and it's QC. So I'm assuming the QC is the member from Cat Island, Rumkey, and El Salvador, right? But the member for Cat Island did the member for Exuma a disservice, because he was clearly unable to articulate clearly those sections of the bill that his QC shared with him. Did not have enough time to spend to really go over it. Because when you look at section A3B of the Recreational Water Sports Amendment Bill, I see nothing wrong with it. You know, I see nothing wrong with it. We have to ensure that those persons out there, and there are countless examples of it in the past, and it still continues to happen today. Those persons out there with criminal records, and I'm talking for serious offenses. There have been cases where persons have been operating these jet skis with ankle bracelets and on bail for very serious offenses. Do you want those individuals engaging and interacting with your visitors? Tourism is our #1 industry, the key pillar to our economy. And you heard the great minister from Cap Rose, Freetown. He says what, Mr. Speaker? 6.5 million. 6.5 million and growing. That can only continue to grow with a responsible government. A government who understands its primary duty, which is to do everything that is humanly possible to protect this vital industry of ours. And as we move to enact this compendium of bills, this is another demonstration that this government is about conducting the serious business of this country and ensuring a future for all Bahamians. And so, Mr. Speaker, in addition to some of the other comments that were made in relation to this bill, as a government, and also included in this bill and the bill relations to the water sports and recreational water sports amendment bill, the introduction of technology, which is extremely important, and the member for Bamboo Town would have touched on it and the clause that speaks to it. But it is important to note that this government is doing yeoman's task behind the scenes to ensure that we put the necessary infrastructure in place to support this bill and other similar bills. At present, Customs is aggressively working on a state-of-the-art technology that will ensure that every vessel traversing the waters of the Bahamas can be tracked. And that technology, because we're a government that we don't believe in working in silos. We work across ministries. And so with that technology, the other relevant ministries will also be privy to it. And this will allow for us to ensure that we're not only bringing legislation to the table, but we're also putting the infrastructure in place to support the legislation. So yes, we are a nation, an archipelago of 100,000 square miles of sea. And we're ensuring that we can't support that just by human resources. So we're bringing in technology like this. We're bringing in the drones. We're in the process of signing a contract for drone technology that will span across ministries, support ministries. We talked about radar technology and other forms of technologies that will allow us to reach across the length and breadth of this country to ensure that we protect the sovereignty of this nation for the people of this nation. And so, Mr. Speaker, on that note, Mount Moriah supports this bill, this compendium of bills. Thank you so much. May God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Commercial Recreational Watercraft Act. As many as in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the Commercial Recreational Watercraft Act.
For the second reading of bills. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do move for second reading and committal of a bill for water skiing and motorboat control amendment bill 2019.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Water Skiing and Motorboat Control Act. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to amend the Water Skiing and Motorboat Control Act.
For the second reading and committal of bills.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further second readings.
Committee of the whole House. Third reading and passing of bills. Consideration of Senate amendments. Resolutions. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the following resolution. Whereas the government of the Commonwealth of the... And Mr. Speaker, I beg your indulgence to read just the first and the last paragraph.
Granted, when this resolution was tabled, I believe the entire resolution
Correct.
was read into the record.
Correct, it was. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the following resolution. Whereas the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the government, entered into a heads of agreement dated 25th February 2000.
Just a moment. The chair recognizes the honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island on a point of order.
I'm wondering whether this resolution was previously tabled. My recollection is that this came to us only yesterday, and Mr. Speaker, subsequent to that, Mr. Speaker, we requested additional information in relation to the heads of agreement, the first and the second one, the ones that was replaced on the new one, Mr. Speaker, in relation to this matter. To date, we have not received that information, Mr. Speaker, and on behalf of the opposition, Mr. Speaker, we object to proceeding with this resolution at this time, Mr. Speaker, and we invite the government side in the interest of transparency, accountability, and fair play to seek to bring this matter perhaps at the next sitting, after they would have provided the opposition with the information that they requested, so that they might thoroughly examine and contribute to this matter. Mr. Speaker, I take particular interest and objection to this matter. Not that I'm necessarily opposed to it, Mr. Speaker, but because this resolution impacts my constituency. And in doing so, Mr. Speaker, we requested that information. It has not been forthcoming, and the government side should do the right thing and provide the information so that we can contribute meaningfully to the resolution. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Just by way of housekeeping, before I recognize the member for East Grand Bahama, according to our action sheet, this resolution was given by notice on the 25th of April. The chair now recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, you're absolutely correct. There was proper notice given. Mr. Speaker, I move the following resolution. Whereas the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the government, entered into a heads of agreement dated 25th February 2002, the 2002 heads of agreement. The dates are important, Mr. Speaker, 2002. The heads of agreement. Thank you very much.
They were the heads of agreement.
With Exuma Resort Development Limited, the purchaser, a company incorporated under and existing in accordance with the laws of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, for the purpose of a touristic development in Norman's Key, one of the keys in the Exuma range of keys, one of the islands of the said Commonwealth. And moving to the last paragraph, Mr. Speaker.
It matters. 9 o'clock last night. I know you want that 90 days.
Now, therefore, be it resolved that pursuant to Section 273 of the Companies Act, Chapter 308, and Sections 53A of the Ministry of Finance Act, Chapter 23, and in consideration of the purchase price specified in the agreement as amended, which said consideration should be reflected in any other document necessary to consummate the transaction contemplated hereby, and entered into between the treasurer and the purchaser and/or NC McDuff's Limited. This House approves 1, grant of a right-of-way over the Heron Didiments listed in the first schedule hereto. 2, sale by the treasurer to the purchaser of the fee simple of the Heron Didiments listed in second and third schedules hereto. And 3, sale by the treasurer to NC McDuff's Limited of the fee simple of the Heron Didiments listed in the fourth schedule hereto. And the schedules are attached, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important, in respect to the comments earlier, that this heads of agreement is from 2002. This is not a new heads of agreement. And if I would have remembered correctly, the opposite side would have been in government at the time. So they certainly would have had notice and would have had an opportunity to research their records and reflect on what would have happened, Mr. Speaker. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, the resolution today, the purpose of the resolution is to obtain from both the House of the Parliament approval in order to give effect to outstanding obligations of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, to convey to Exuma Resource Development Limited, a company incorporated under and existing in accordance with the laws of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the purchaser, or its designated affiliate, certain lands pursuant to the heads of agreement executed between the government and the purchaser. The government entered into the heads of agreement on the 20th of February 2002, and then the government entered into a superseding heads of agreement on the 23rd of April 2008, which superseded and replaced the 2008 heads of agreement. On 4th of May 2012, the government entered into a first supplement to the agreement with the purchaser, which amended the agreement. By an indenture of conveyance dated 4th May 2012, the Treasurer conveyed the certain hereditaments specified therein to the purchaser pursuant to the agreement for a consideration of $1 million. The construction and development of the hereditaments provided for in the agreement, other good and valuable consideration, and the granting to the purchaser of development as developers of the right-of-way and easement set forth in the third schedule to the agreement. The purchaser requested the government reconsider the land exchange set forth in the agreement so that the purchaser can have a contiguous piece of land which was vital to completing the development on the portion of Norman's Key known as Macduff's. Further, the purchaser slightly modified the layout of the project on the remainder of Norman's Key, particularly in the area of the marina, and therefore made application to the government for amendments to the land exchanges initially proposed. And I'm understanding that this amendment was made so that the marina itself, which is one of the largest in the country, will be able to flush properly. So this is important from an ecological, environmental perspective. The matter was considered by the National Economic Council, which agreed to grant a right-of-way to the purchaser and his successors entitled over 3.861 acres of roadway detailed in the first schedule of the resolution, and more particularly delineated on the plan recorded in the Department of Lands and Surveys as Plan Number 599EX, subject to the purchaser meeting the requirements of the relevant government agencies. The Council also agreed to convey certain lands from the Treasurer to the purchaser and its subsidiary NC Macduff's Limited, an international business company incorporated under and existing in accordance with the laws of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Consequently, the Treasurer shall convey 8.488 acres of land in total as follows. Freehold conveyance to the purchaser and its successors in title of 2.304 acres, detailed in the second schedule to the resolution, and more particularly delineated in a plan recorded in the Department of Land and Surveys, plan number 600EX. Freehold convey to the purchaser and its successors a title of 3.179 acres, detailed in the third schedule to the resolution, plan number 602EX. And freehold conveyance to Macduff's of 3.005 acres, detailed in the fourth schedule to the resolution, which is outlined in plan number 598EX. In exchange for the conveyances of the said 8.488 acres of land, the Treasurer shall receive from the freehold of 8.617 acres of land, more particularly delineated on the plan recorded in the Department of Lands and Survey as plan number 598EX. So Mr. Speaker, it's an exchange of land. There's no new land. It's an exchange of land where the government has agreed to grant this piece of land to make the development a contiguous piece of land in exchange for another piece of land that was formerly a part of this development. In fact, Mr. Speaker, as a result of this exchange, the government actually gains 0.219 acres of land, if that means anything. So, Mr. Speaker, in addition to, pursuant to Clause 4.2 of the agreement, the Treasurer will be receiving a preferred return equal to 5% of the gross sales proceeds received by the purchaser in connection with the sale of the land to third parties on any real estate lot or any other residential lot located within the freehold. So as they sell their property, the government will be entitled to 5% of the sales. Such preferred return to be paid to the Treasurer concurrent with payment of applicable stamp duties on the conveyance of such residential lots. So, Mr. Speaker, as you can see, again, this is really just an exercise to make the development more functional in terms of providing for the marina and making the development one complete piece, uninterrupted piece of contiguous land. At the end of the exchange, the Treasurer is going to give exchange 8.488 acres of land and receive in return 8.617 acres of land, gaining this 0.219 acres without any loss of quality and without any compensation or outlay of funds. This development is already receiving the interest of some globally recognized captains of industry and entertainment, and promises to add considerably to the reputation of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I am advised that there are a number of buyers who are in a holding pattern and hesitating as a result of the delay in this piece of land being sought out, as well as their Bahamian contractors who are waiting for this arrangement to be passed through the House and the Parliament so that they can go back to work. And it's a substantial amount of investment and understanding with respect to that. And so I do move and recommend for acceptance of this amendment. And as I sit, Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to say in respect to tourism, I received a note from, they claim the dealers at Atlantis who wanted to commend the Minister of Tourism. They said that, in their words, they just wanted to tell the Minister that this has been the best April they have had in a long, long time. So, Mr. Speaker, I certainly do want to commend the Minister myself, and you're hearing it from the persons, Atlantis. So we're hearing it from the people on the ground. Yeah, it's not Bahama. These are the people at Atlantis. so we are ticking on all cylinders at the moment, Mr. Speaker, and certainly a lot of credit and commendation goes to the Minister of Tourism and his team. Mr. Speaker, as I take my seat, I do want to recommend and advise the public that the 9-month fiscal report is out. It is available on the Ministry of Finance's website. As well as on Facebook and WhatsApp and any other way you want to get it. I want to make that particularly clear here because I continue to get the question, where the VAT money gone? And Mr. Speaker, the fiscal snapshots and the more detailed report are intended to provide the public with exactly answers to that question. So there's no excuse for anybody not to know. We have been very transparent, historically so, very transparent in this process. And we certainly, as the Minister, the Shadow Minister for Finance, member for Exuma and Ragged Island, quite frankly, rightly said, it is a good thing. We are being transparent. And to the extent that we have issues to work on, we don't hide from them. I said that when I did this in the first instance, put the legislation forward. We don't hide from the shortfall. Those things happen. And we are certainly very happy to provide that. But just to summarize, the deficit is down year over year by 132 million. We've paid 112 of the 172 million in arrears that we told the Bahamian people that we were going to pay. And interesting enough, Mr. Speaker, business license collections are up 35%. And we didn't increase the rates. So you can't blame that. That means activity is happening, things are happening. So, Mr. Speaker, so far so good. We continue to hold the line and continue to be disciplined about what it is that we're trying to accomplish. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the Drive into Math competition team at East End Junior High School for their third place finish in that competition in Grand Bahama. First place went to Jack Haywood Junior High. Yes. Second place went to Sister Mary Patricia School. And the third place went to East End Junior in McLeanstown, Grand Bahama. You would know, Mr. Speaker, East End Junior High School is in the farthest eastern part of the island you can get. And so they are doing well. And so I want to congratulate them, their coach, Ms. Sanitra Paul, for a job well done. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the skippers, the sailors, and the organizers of the National Family Island Regatta. Again, unfortunately for Exuma, the hardware went to Long Island. So I want to congratulate those, the Knowles brothers, for their their hard-earned win once again. They certainly have a record, and we congratulate them for continuing this wonderful legacy in our heritage and culture. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I now move the resolutions.
Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Garden Hills.
Mr. Speaker, I am honored to rise to second this resolution on behalf of the wonderful people of the Garden Hills constituency. And I second the resolution, Mr. Speaker, because of my fervent commitment to the people in Exuma. And in doing so, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the Member of Parliament for Exuma would recognize that this is an example of the F&M putting money on the ground. And to put money on the ground in Exuma, Mr. Speaker, is a wonderful thing. And I also want to commend the Member of Parliament for Exuma for taking the high road and trying to put a little bit of sense in the heads of his colleagues as we sought to, let me, all right. I take that back, Exuma. I want to commend you for advising your colleagues that water sports is one of the largest activities in Exuma, and that you have a special interest in the scores of ordinary Bahamians, particularly the young men engaged in the boating industry. And I want to commend you for putting a case for them. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure if he was allowed to do what he did before, he would have been the one to second this motion for us putting $90 million of investment on the ground for the great people of Exuma. And so, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to say I speak for him this time, but I know in his heart he's rejoicing. And this is a good example of how the Free National Movement, notwithstanding what the opposition may say, this is an example of what the Free National Movement is committed to doing to the small, ordinary Bahamians. And when I say small, ordinary Bahamians, I'm sure scores of individuals will be impacted by the development in Norman's Key. And again, this will also increase the number of tourists coming to Exuma. I think the Member of Parliament for Freetown said we are nearly 25%. And so, Mr. Speaker, Exuma is doing extraordinarily well. And both myself and the Member of Parliament for Exuma would wish to encourage the Minister of Tourism and this government to continue to do this great work. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am honored to second this resolution. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be passed. Whereas the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the government, entered into the heads of agreement dated the 25th of February 2002, the 2002 HOA, with the Exuma Resort Developers Limited, the purchaser, a company incorporated under the an existing in accordance with the laws of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for the purpose of a touristic development in Norman's Key, one of the keys in the Exuma range of keys, one of the islands of the said Commonwealth, now therefore be it resolved that pursuant to Section 273 of the Companies Act, Chapter 308, and Section 5, Subsection 3A of the Ministry of Finance Act, Chapter 23, and in consideration of the purchase price specified in the agreement as amended, which said consideration shall be reflected in any other document necessary to consummate the transactions contemplated hereby and entered into between the treasurer and the purchaser and or N.C. Macduff's Limited. The House approves, 1, the grant of a right of way over the hereditaments listed in the first schedule hereto. 2, sale by the treasurer to the purchaser of the fee simple of the hereditaments listed in the second and third schedules hereto. And 3, sale by the treasurer to N.C. Macduff's Limited of the fee simple of the hereditaments listed in the fourth schedule hereto. As many. The chair recognizes the honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island.
I rise to speak on this resolution, Mr. Speaker, and I reiterate the point that I made earlier. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, the opposition did request the heads of agreement from the leader of government business. To date, we have not received them, Mr. Speaker. I cannot say specifically when that request was made, but I do know, based on information provided by the leader of opposition business, that it was in fact made, Mr. Speaker. I find it regrettable that a government who stands on a soapbox of transparency and accountability every day chose not to provide it in time for this debate today. And whether it was made last week or last night, Mr. Speaker, I believe there has been a spirit of cooperation where the opposition has not unreasonably obstructed the government's business. And we have been cooperative, sometimes without notice, Mr. Speaker. We proceed with pieces of legislation when it's expedient for the government to carry out its business. Mr. Speaker, I am the Member of Parliament for Exumas, as I believe everyone is aware. And I believe it is important, Mr. Speaker, that on issues impacting my constituency, as a member of the opposition, that the government provide the information as requested so that I may be fully apprised. Mr. Speaker, I believe that is only good form so to do. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, the public of the Bahamas is well aware that this member is pro-business, and this member is pro-investment, and this member will not unreasonably obstruct any good investment opportunity that will create opportunities for Bahamians, whether jobs or entrepreneurial opportunities for the people of Exuma. So let me be very clear, Mr. Speaker, that my objection is in relation to the process that's been undertaken, the lack of providing the requested information, and not necessarily to the project at hand. Let me be very clear. I will abstain from this vote, Mr. Speaker, for that reason. But you know, I want to point out, Mr. Speaker, that I haven't been apprised of, and I in fact have several questions, Mr. Speaker, and I believe this state of play could have been avoided. Let me firstly say, Mr. Speaker, that the the member for East Grand Bahama noted that the first heads of agreement was entered into on the 25th of February 2002. And then he quickly added that it was under the PLP's administration when this occurred. I wasn't here, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure whether he was. But my recollection is that the election was held in May 2002 when the Christie Prime Minister was installed. And I believe, for the record, this resolution, the first heads of agreement, says 25th of February 2002, Mr. Speaker. Just to clarify the record, not that it's of significant substance, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do have several questions in the absence of the heads of agreement that I'd like to put on the table, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, I'm interested in knowing the number of people employed at the resort. I'm interested in knowing the number of Exumians employed at the resort. I'm interested in understanding, Mr. Speaker, without the heads of agreement, I am unable to effectively respond in relation to whether this swap is something that we have no objection to, Mr. Speaker. The second point I wish to make, Mr. Speaker, as I am aware, the development had been moving at a not very fast pace, Mr. Speaker, and therefore I would wish to feel or be satisfied, feel comfort that indeed the developer is in compliance with the requirements of the heads of agreement. I would be interested, Mr. Speaker, in understanding the scope of the heads of agreement, Mr. Speaker. I would be interested in understanding, Mr. Speaker, fundamentally whether the commitment and the obligation under the heads of agreement have in fact been met. Mr. Speaker, I take my job here very seriously. The people of Exuma and Ragged Island sent me here to look out for their interests. I believe in making presentations to this House of Assembly that's informed. I believe in examining the facts associated with the resolution on behalf of the people of Exuma and Ragged Island. I promise them that when I come here, I will work for them every day, and I will hold their hands every step of the way. And with this in mind, Mr. Speaker, I don't stand here to filibuster or unreasonably obstruct the government's business. I stand there on behalf of the people of Exuma to say to this government that notwithstanding that this member is in opposition, this member will speak to the needs of the people of Exuma and Ragged Island. It will speak to the issues going on in the constituency of Exuma, and we expect, the people of Exuma expect, Mr. Speaker, that this government will be forthcoming with information in relation to heads of agreements that's relevant to Exuma and the people of Exuma. Mr. Speaker, on that note, I thank you for the opportunity to make remarks on this resolution.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to wrap up on this resolution, I am advised, Mr. Speaker, that the information that the member asked for was received at 6:25 p.m. last night. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the point is that proper notice was given at the last sitting of the House of the intention to move this resolution. Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to say this to my friend and in general,
Georgetown Regatta got in the middle of it.
if you are so interested in this project and representing, as it is, does affect Exuma and Ragged Island, I would think that the first duty would be to go and to investigate it. Mr. Speaker. No, I didn't, no.
Honorable member, the honorable member for Exumas, on a point of order.
No, I'm finished. I'm finished.
The
Point
chair,
of order, Mr. Speaker.
the chair recognizes the honorable member for Exumas and Ragged Island, on a point of order.
This is a straightforward matter.
It is.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we requested the information, whatever time it was requested by the leader of opposition business, Mr. Speaker, and it wasn't provided, and all I'm saying is that in the spirit of cooperation, Mr. Speaker, and we don't need to get, let's not get personal with this, Mr. Speaker, because, you know, the budget debate is coming up, Mr. Speaker, and I'll have an hour to speak, Mr. Speaker. So there's no need to get personal. Allow me to finish, East Grand Bahama. No, I'm on a point of order, and I've been recognized by the Speaker, so your time will come. I'm on a point of order, Mr. Speaker. The member is misleading in the sense that whilst the information may have, and I have no specific as to when it was requested, Mr. Speaker, what I'm demonstrating is that on more occasion than one, we have cooperated with the government in moving its business forward, and we expect the same courtesy, Mr. Speaker, and that's the basis on which I stand, and we needn't get personal on the issue, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, one of the things that we ought not to do is to make threats. The budget is coming. There's no doubt about that. And I'm sure that the member will have his say, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. I appreciate that you taking that back.
This is a matter.
But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, this, this is a matter... I always have to remind people that Exuma is my friend. So I don't take it as a threat, but it shouldn't be said. And I think he agrees to take that back, so I accept that as it is. But, Mr. Speaker, the point is that this is a matter of some urgency, because the project has come to a standstill as a result of the need to resolve this matter. And those, again, it's not just about the investor, which obviously that's very important, as the completion of the project will provide continuous sustainable jobs, but it's also about those contractors who are now in abeyance, waiting for something to happen that is no fault of their own. And these are, you know, as the opposition says, put money on the ground. But this is our opportunity to engage people in meaningful employment so that they have their own money and I don't have to throw any money on the ground. And so I would think that the opposition would relish the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, particularly as it is in the constituency of Exuma Ragged Island, to push this forward. I can't see no reason, Mr. Speaker, no reason, given regard to the fact that this is from 2002, and I do want to correct the record, the member for Exuma and Ragged Island is correct. This happened under an F&M government. But I would think that they'd want to push this forward because it is a beneficial development, Mr. Speaker, and it will provide jobs for that constituency. So I don't think that it's one that we ought to hold off on to some ceremony. This is not a contentious issue. The land that is being swapped is in fact similar land, and so there's no disadvantage to the government of the Bahamas and the people of the Bahamas in doing this. It facilitates the transaction and the investment. So I think it's a very good thing. So again, Mr. Speaker, I do recommend the resolution and pray for its passage. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable member. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed. Whereas the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the government entered into the heads of agreement dated the 25th of February 2002, the 2002 HOA, with Exuma Resort Developers Limited, the purchaser, a company incorporated under and existing in accordance with the laws of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for the purpose of a touristic development in Norman's Key, one of the keys in the Exuma range of keys, one of the islands of the said Commonwealth. Now, therefore, be it resolved that pursuant to Section 273 of the Companies Act, Chapter 308, and Section 5, Subsection 3A of the Ministry of Finance Act, Chapter 23, and in consideration of the purchase price specified in the agreement as amended, which said consideration shall be reflected in any other document necessary to consummate the transactions contemplated hereby and entered into between the treasurer and the purchaser and/or N.C. McDuff's Limited. The House approves, 1, the grant of a right-of-way over the hereditaments listed in the first schedule hereto. 2, sale by the treasurer to the purchaser of the fee simple of the hereditaments listed in the second and third schedule hereto. And 3, sale by the treasurer to N.C. McDuff's Limited of the fee simple of the hereditaments listed in the fourth schedule hereto. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The resolution is agreed. Further resolutions. Honorable members, we now are in the order of business member statement, and we will be confined to the rule of 30 minutes or less.
There's no members.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island. Member statements?
Member statement, Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, Mr. Speaker, I want to give a special thank you to the Commodore and organizers of the National Family Island Regatta and the government for their support. And certainly, Mr. Speaker, next year we look forward to ongoing and continued support. Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the Tidal Wave, who placed third in the A class, Mr. Speaker, and certainly the Ragged Island boats as well, the new Courageous, Mr. Speaker, who performed well as well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a great legacy for Exuma and Ragged Island, and we shall return. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Further member statements? Appointment of select committees. Instructions to select committees. Discharge of select committees. Notices for future meetings. Chair recognizes the honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to... Firstly, Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful that you would have renewed notices on behalf of the opposition for last week. I stand to renew notices on behalf of Her Majesty's loyal opposition.
Thank you, honorable member. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I stand to renew all matters in the name of the government and signals, Mr. Speaker, that we will return to the House, that the House will adjourn until 10 a.m. Wednesday, the 15th of May, 2019.
Is there a seconder? Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that this House adjourns to 10 a.m. Wednesday, the 15th of May, 2019. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Final adjournment.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the House adjourns.
Thank you. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House adjourns to 10 a.m. Wednesday, the 15th of May, 2019. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The House stands adjourned to 10 a.m. Wednesday, the 15th of May, 2019.